South Korea bolsters venture investments by shifting the paradigm to a private-led one, while financing worth billions of dollars to help the country become a global startup powerhouse. Another grim outlook for the nation's shrinking population as the birth rate in the second quarter is lower than any other Q2 period. Starting tomorrow, COVID-19 will be treated in a similar way to the flu in Korea as the health authorities lower its disease level. New infections seem to have been on a downward trend over the last 2 weeks. It's August 30th, 2023. This is News Center.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us. I'm Yoon Jung-min. We begin with the nation's ambitious plan to render South Korea a leading startup powerhouse in the world. Unveiled today was a comprehensive support plan to bolster local startups that centers on private-led growth and injecting more funds. Our business correspondent Shin Ha-young reports.
The government is rolling up its sleeves to become one of the world's top 3 startup nations. The goal was announced by the Ministry of SMEs and Startups on Wednesday with the comprehensive measures that unveiled during a Startup Korea strategy meeting held by President Yoon.
정부가 주도하고 있는 스타트업 생태계 역시 민간 중심, 시장 중심으로 과감하게 바꿔 나가야 된다고 생각합니다. 민간이 투자를 주도하고 스스로 생태계를 키우고 또 정부는 민간 모펀드에 대한 일정한 출자와 또 세제 지원 이런 방식으로 확대해 나가야 된다고 봅니다.
The ministry will expand venture investment by establishing a Startup Korea fund worth 2 trillion Korean won or roughly $1.5 billion in which both public and private sectors will invest. This will increase the size of venture investment from last year's $9.4 billion to $10.7 billion by 2027. Areas of investment include deep tech sectors such as system semiconductors and AI, while it will be also used for global expansion. The government is also diversifying its method of startup support, which had previously consisted of subsidies. While increasing the subsidy amounts, authorities are also reviewing a method where a portion of the additional support received would be reclaimed when revenue is generated. For instance, if there is a startup that has been receiving a subsidy of 100 million won, it would receive 130 million won in total support, with the additional 30 million won being recovered over several years once it starts making money. For the globalization of the startup and venture ecosystem, the government will also support Koreans who start businesses overseas. The global fund that supports domestic startups to go abroad will be expanded to around $7.5 billion by next year. It will also introduce a new program called Global Tips to support the startups that receive investments from foreign venture capitalists and establish offshore corporations. Within 4 years, the ministry aims to have 5 startups on the global top 100 list of unicorn companies or companies worth over $1 billion. Shin Ha-young, Arirang News.
Tokyo's Fukushima Water discharge has yet again sparked controversy among politicians in Korea over how to call it. Our political correspondent Lee Si-hoo has a recap of the controversy on whether it's wastewater or treated wastewater.
Prime Minister Han Duck-soo said the correct expression for the discharge from the Fukushima nuclear power plant is scientifically treated wastewater. Han made this statement at an appearance before the National Assembly's Special Committee on Budget and Accounts on Wednesday morning.
The president of the National Federation of Fisheries Cooperatives officially announced that from now on they'll call it the Fukushima treated water.
Technically speaking, it's scientifically treated wastewater, or according to the IAEA, the Alps treated wastewater. I believe this is the scientifically correct expression. As for what the government will do about the issue, it needs more consideration.
This is despite the different terminology, including just wastewater, used by various media outlets, the Prime Minister added. On the same day, ruling People Power Party senior spokesperson Yoo Sang-bum told reporters that the term treated contaminated water should be used officially. He explained that is the official term used by the IAEA. However, the main opposition Democratic Party, which held a rally against the discharge, decried that term. DP spokesperson Lee So-young told Arirang News that the party will continue to call it wastewater, more exactly radioactive wastewater, because Japan's Alps cannot filter out all radioactive nuclides. She added that although Tokyo and the IAEA say the concentration levels are below standards, no one can know for sure exactly how many radioactive nuclides are being released. Lee Si-hoo, Arirang News.
Authorities here are ramping up safety checks for seafood to ease public concerns following the Fukushima Water release. Shin Se-byuk has more.
Japan's release of Fukushima wastewater is sparking concerns among South Korean fishmongers. Though yet to see a major hit in sales, there is a growing worry that fish markets will become financial victims over fears that consumers will turn their backs on seafood products.
There's this concern about whether the seafood is actually safe. It's like, can we really eat it without any worries?
To dispel public safety concerns, the government is stepping up inspections of waters surrounding South Korea as well as seafood products.
We're carrying out thorough safety checks on both the seawater and fish.
Special inspections are also being carried out. On Monday, the government kicked off a 100-day intensive inspection to monitor the marking of the origin of seafood at some 20,000 stores. This is the second intensive inspection, which follows the first round of checks in May and June. Major seafood items to be inspected include scallops, sea breams, and sea squirts. Korean fishmongers rely on Japanese imports for these products. According to government data, South Korea imported 10,610 tons of seafood from Japan in the first half of 2023, which accounts for 2% of the total. Meanwhile, the government is coming up with measures to boost seafood consumption as it strives to ensure seafood safety. It plans to hold weekend festivals and sales events across the country as part of efforts to encourage people to buy more seafood products. Shin Se-byuk, Arirang News.
And in related news, Beijing and Tokyo continue to clash fiercely over the latter's release of wastewater and the former's related ban on all Japanese seafood products. Choi Min-jung has the latest.
Beijing's decision to ban all of its seafood imports from Japan has prompted Tokyo to threaten to take Beijing to the World Trade Organization in order to seek a reversal. Japan's Foreign Minister Yoshimasa Hayashi on Tuesday said that Japan will take necessary action under various routes, including the WTO framework. On the same day, Beijing's Foreign Ministry spokesman urged Japan to take concrete action.
In response to the Japanese side's extremely selfish and irresponsible wrong action, China and other parties at stake have the right and responsibility to take legitimate, reasonable and necessary precautionary measures to safeguard marine environment safety, food security and people's health.
In China, demand for seafood already appears to be falling, putting those in the fishing industry in a tough situation. Outraged Chinese citizens have also been dialing the numbers of Japanese businesses and institutions to complain about the release. In the 4 days following the start of the discharge, more than 6,000 calls were made to the Tokyo Electric Power Company, while 220 calls were made to police stations across Japan. Japan has also reportedly made phone calls with complaints to the Chinese embassy and consulates, something the Chinese embassy said seriously disrupts the normal operation of their offices. Flights to Japan from China have decreased by a third over the past week, and more people with flights booked are demanding refunds. According to Japanese media outlets, Prime Minister Fumio Kishida will likely address the issue at the ASEAN meeting and G20 summit next month. There, he is expected to engage in dialogue with participating countries and reiterate that the wastewater discharge meets international safety standards. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
The birth rate at home dropped once again to a record low 0.7 per woman in the second quarter. Now Korea has been seeing its overall population decline for nearly 4 years. Park Go-nu has the details.
South Korea's population continues to fall. According to data by Statistics Korea on Wednesday, the country's population saw its 44th straight month of natural decrease. Ever since November 2019, deaths have exceeded births. The total birth rate in the second quarter was just 0.7, which is the lowest for any April to June period. This was a drop of 0.05 per woman from the second quarter of last year. The rate has been hovering under the 1 per woman mark in 2018. The number of births in the second quarter fell to its lowest ever figure, dropping by 6.8% compared to the same period in 2022. This was the 30th quarter in a row that the number of births has fallen. The birth figures for June was also down 1.6% year-on-year, a record high for any other June. An official from Statistics Korea said this was mainly caused by the shrinking number of females aged 25 and 39, and as more people are staying single or getting married later. In fact, research from the agency on Monday showed only 1 out of 3 young adults think positively about marriage, and half of them answered that having children is unnecessary. The number of deaths increased 7.6% year-on-year in June to over 26,000, which was the highest of any June since the data was first compiled in 1983. In terms of the second quarter of this year, there were 8% fewer deaths due to the base effects of COVID-19 in the second quarter of last year. Marriages in June increased 7.8% on year, while divorces were also up 2.7%. Park Gun-woo, Arirang News.
Guidelines for a health care support program for postpartum mothers and newborns provided by the government will, from this Thursday, be available in 7 languages. The Ministry of Health and Welfare offers a postpartum mothers and newborns health care support program to support the recovery of mothers and provide care for newborns. The program is targeted at households with incomes that are up to 150% lower than the median income, with some flexibility depending on the local government, in order to reduce difficulties faced by multiracial families that accounted for around 17% of total recipients in the first half of the year. Guidelines will now be available in 7 languages. New COVID infections have been on a downward trend in Korea over the last 2 weeks. And starting tomorrow, COVID-19 will be recategorized as a level 4 disease, the same as flu. Our Choi Soo-hyung explains what's changing.
With COVID-19's infectious disease categorization being lowered from level 2 to level 4, a care system similar to that for influenza is being implemented within the general healthcare system. Infectious diseases are categorized into different levels based on their risk of spreading. When the coronavirus was first detected here in January 2020, it was classified as a level 1 disease, a highly contagious infection, or one with the most risk of spreading. Just over 2 years later, on April 25, 2022, the government declared it a level 2 disease in the same grouping as tuberculosis, measles, and cholera, and after another year and 4 months, level 4 like the flu. The most significant change is that there will be no more daily reporting of confirmed cases numbers. Instead, the government plans to operate a more precise monitoring system to observe COVID-19 trends on a weekly basis. The system will be operated through 527 monitoring agencies, and starting on September 13th, the disease status will be announced every Wednesday. Additionally, rapid antigen and PCR testing conducted at doctors' offices and screening clinics must now be paid for. Mandatory mask wearing at high-risk facilities such as hospitals and nursing homes for the elderly will continue, as will the recommended 5-day isolation for confirmed cases. Even with the transition to a level 4 infectious disease healthcare system, vaccinations will still be available free of charge. The government and healthcare experts strongly advise getting vaccinated, highlighting that an annual shot will effectively reduce mortality and severe illness rates among high-risk groups.
Obviously, in protection of ourselves, vaccination would be strongly recommended if a person has not gotten yet. What I've noticed more commonly recently is that people who come in with rather relatively higher or severe symptoms, they tend to have not yet experienced COVID, or they have not received vaccinations.
The government plans to maintain a direct COVID-19 response team at the Ministry of Health and Welfare instead of relying only on administrative agencies in the case of a possible winter resurgence. Choi Soo-hyung, Arirang News.
Senior working-level officials from the foreign ministries of South Korea, China, and Japan are reportedly working to meet here in Seoul in late September as they seek to hold a summit between their leaders by the end of this year. Citing unnamed sources, Japan's Mainichi Shimbun reported Wednesday that the upcoming meeting is expected to be led by deputy minister-level officials and that Tokyo's senior deputy foreign minister Takahiro Funakoshi will likely attend. It also says they will likely face challenges while scheduling the summit as Beijing has been strongly protesting the Fukushima wastewater release. In response, Seoul's foreign ministry said it is currently working with relevant countries to reactivate a trilateral consultative group with the goal of holding the summit by the end of the year. The Biden administration says it remains open to dialogue with North Korea despite its leader's latest hostile rhetoric, calling the leaders of South Korea, the U.S., and Japan gang bosses. Lee Seung-jae has more.
Earlier this week, North Korea's state-run Korean Central News Agency reported that its leader Kim Jong-un slammed the leaders of South Korea, the U.S., and Japan, calling them gang bosses for agreeing to regularize their joint military exercises. However, despite Kim's comments, Washington says it remains open to dialogue with Pyongyang. White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre said Tuesday that the U.S. has said on many occasions that they're open to dialogue with the reclusive state, and it remains true even now. Despite the U.S.'s openness to hold talks with Pyongyang, South Korean ambassador to the United States, Choi Yun-dong, said Tuesday during a forum hosted by the Washington-based Center for Strategic and International Studies that the opportunity for reopening dialogue with North Korea is not likely for the time being. Cho also reiterated South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol's stance that the continued provocations from Pyongyang will only strengthen the trilateral security cooperation between the three countries. Meanwhile, during the same event, the U.S. National Security Council Coordinator for Indo-Pacific Affairs, Kurt Campbell, highlighted the three allies' commitment to institutionalizing their three-way cooperation. Campbell stressed that what was seen in the Camp David summit was a sense of three equal, powerful, committed, determined nations meeting on equal terms, noting that no country is weaker or stronger in the alliance. However, he also said the trilateral cooperation cannot be future-proof, given the historical differences between South Korea and Japan being the major source of conflict between the two neighboring countries. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
South Korea and the U.S. today held a joint air drill over the West Sea involving a U.S. B-1B strategic bomber. It was part of the Ulji Freedom Shield exercise, and the nation's defense ministry says that the drill featured South Korean F-A-50 fighter jets with U.S. F-16 fighters. This marks the 10th drill this year that has mobilized at least one U.S. strategic bomber. The B-1B bomber had also been deployed to the Korean peninsula in February in response to Pyongyang's ICBM launch. The ministry said that Wednesday's drill demonstrated extended deterrence in action and pledged for stronger ties with Washington to brace for any possible provocation. Wrapping up her official trip to China, U.S. Secretary of Commerce Gina Raimondo says American firms have complained that China has become uninvestable, prompting Beijing to defend its business practices. Moon Hae-ryun has the details.
U.S. Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo has expressed concern over fines, raids, and other actions against foreign businesses in China, prompting U.S. companies to label the country uninvestable. Bloomberg reported that Raimondo spoke to reporters on a train headed to Shanghai on the third day of her trip and said the visit has reopened communication channels between the two countries' economies. She commented that it had become too risky for American businesses in China and highlighted Beijing's restrictions on Micron Technology's products. Chinese authorities also raided the offices of several US-based consultancies back in March over what it said were national security concerns. However, Raimondo said that the U.S. did not want to decouple from China, with Chinese news agency Xinhua reporting that Premier Li Qiang had said during their meeting on Tuesday that economic relations between the two countries were mutually beneficial.
I mean, the U.S. and China have a massive and consequential economic relationship, which is good for the world. It is good for China. It is good for America. And we want you here investing, growing.
Raimondo's visit to China marks the most recent efforts by the Biden administration to strengthen communication, following trips by Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen earlier this year. These visits were prompted by concerns over escalating tensions between the two superpowers, particularly in economy and defense. The United States' export controls to prevent China's access to advanced semiconductors have been criticized by Beijing. Washington argues that they're essential to safeguard national security as indicated by the CHIPS Act. The Inflation Reduction Act of the United States has also encouraged car makers to shift supply chains out of China. Raimondo is due to wrap up her visit to Shanghai with a meeting with the local party secretary and Shanghai Disney. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
A wildfire that's been burning in northeastern Greece for 11 days has destroyed an area that's larger in size than New York City. The European Union-backed Copernicus Climate Change Service said Tuesday local time that the fire quickly spread across the Everest regions after beginning near the city of Alexandroupolis on August 19th. At least 20 people have been killed in the last week. The spokesperson for the EU said over 81,000 hectares had been burnt, making it the largest wildfire since 2000. The EU's civil protection mechanism has sent 12 aircraft and 400 firefighters to Greece. Government officials added those summer wildfires are common in Greece, strong winds and hot weather have made them more intense this year.
Showers will continue on for tomorrow. The stationary rain front that is stretched out horizontally is spreading showers for most regions. Until Friday, southern parts of the country will be under the most influence, with heavy rain warnings in place for Gyeongsang-do and Jeollanam-do province tonight. Heavy downpours will persist for Jeju Island and the coastlines of Gyeongsang-namdo province, with up to 200 millimeters in the forecast. The remainder of Gyeongsang-do province will see up to 150. Central regions, including Chungcheongdo and Gangwon-do province, will see 5 to 40 millimeters. Relatively less rain is in store for the Seoul metropolitan area, with only about 5 millimeters. And for the south coast and Jeju Island in particular, local downpours of 20 to 40 millimeters per hour may lash the region. For those across rivers and valleys, localized flooding is possible, so please take precautions. Tomorrow, Seoul and Daejeon will be starting off at 21 degrees Celsius. Highs in Seoul and Gwangju will get up to 28, Daejeon 27. Gyeongju and Busan will be topping out at 29 degrees. On Sunday, another round of nationwide rain is in the forecast. That's all for now, and here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is News Center for tonight. Thank you for watching. A panel session coming up.